Welcome, everybody. My name's Gary Fortney, and this is The Trend.
My name is Allie Vogt.
And I'm Sarah Strifler. And this is The Trend. Welcome back to this week's episode.
Gary couldn't join us this week, so you get me and Sarah, your producers.
We're filling in, and we're going to be talking about kind of a local case. It's local to Missouri, at least for part of it, about Gypsy Rose Blanchard. Do you want to get into a little bit of a short background on the case?
Yeah, of course. So in June of 2015, Dee Dee Blanchard, who was 48 years old at the time, lay sleeping in bed where she was stabbed 17 times in her back. The murder was actually orchestrated by her 23-year-old daughter, Gypsy Rose Blanchard. And this happened after decades of medical, physical, and mental abuse by her mother.
Right. A crazy story. I want to get into a little bit about Dee Dee. So Gypsy was born on July 27th of 1991. Two parents, Claudine, I believe is how you say it, who went by Dee Dee Blanchard, and Rod Blanchard. From what we know about their relationship, they got married very quickly, because would have had Gypsy out of wedlock if they did not. And I believe they were both religious and did not want that to occur. So they got married pretty quickly, but soon after getting married, Rod realized that there was something a little odd about Dee Dee. I believe she started saying things about witchcraft and stuff like that, and
just very strange behavior. She was also extremely manipulative.
Yeah.
She forged a lot of checks in family members' names.
Wow.
And that's a big reason why that they moved a lot later, because Dee Dee was actually wanted in several counties in Louisiana.
Right.
And that's where Gypsy was born, Louisiana.
Mm-hmm.
Our story doesn't start in Missouri, but we do eventually move over there. But Gypsy was born in Golden Meadow, Louisiana. And that's where both of her parents had grown up, but it was definitely religious reasons why they had decided to get married after they found out that they were going to have a baby.
Which I think is interesting because they eventually got divorced right before Gypsy was actually born. Divorce in a lot of, especially Catholic churches, like not really necessarily recognized. So I find that very interesting that they rushed almost to the marriage and then ended up getting divorced shortly after, within months, it seems.
Yeah, I think a lot of that had to do with the way that Dee Dee behaved.
Right.
Just regularly. She was just a very odd person.
Right.
I'll say that. Gypsy originally was, at a young age, she was close with both of her parents. But as she got older, Dee Dee controlled a lot of her life, many aspects of her life, and moved her place to place, and it became really hard for her to continue a relationship with her father. Dee Dee also liked to badmouth Rod. Even though Rod wanted to be a part of Gypsy's life, he always paid child support, always did his best to support his daughter.
I believe she was getting like between $1,200 and $1,500 like monthly for Gypsy.
Yeah, but even though she was receiving those payments, Dee Dee still liked to say that, oh, Rod's a drug addict, Rod is a deadbeat, he doesn't want anything to do with Gypsy.
Right.
And that's what she told Gypsy.
Yeah, and I think Gypsy, that's what she knew, right? For her entire life. She had no idea that her dad wanted to be, like, wanted anything to do with her.
Yeah. So when Gypsy Rose was a baby, Dee Dee claimed that she had sleep apnea. And this was the start of many medical issues that Dee Dee had claimed that Gypsy had. When she was 8, Dee Dee described her as suffering from leukemia and muscular dystrophy. And she said that Gypsy required a wheelchair and a feeding tube.
Wow.
A lot of really serious conditions.
For sure.
And the list kept growing and eventually included seizures, asthma, and hearing and visual impairments. So at this point, Gypsy is bald, she has glasses, she's in a wheelchair. She looks like a very sickly child. But in reality, Gypsy Rose could walk, she didn't need a feeding tube, and she didn't have cancer. None of this was true. Her head was only bald because her mom shaved her head.
Wow. Which I think it's because she told her too, like, the hair is going to fall out anyways because she had leukemia and was on treatments for it.
Yeah.
So I think she told her, we got to keep it neat and it's going to go anyway, so might as well shave it. But
Yeah. So the outsiders weren't the only people thinking that Gypsy had all of these conditions.
Right.
Gypsy herself believed that she was really seriously ill. And during hospital visits, because with all of those conditions, obviously,
Mhm.
you're going to have to go to the hospital.
Right.
Dee Dee was the only one who would speak to the doctors. She would never allow Gypsy to speak to the doctors. Gypsy was just meant to sit quietly, holding a stuffed animal, and not speak. And Dee Dee was sweet and charismatic on the outside, so nobody wanted to question why she would do this, even if people were suspicious. I mean, to accuse a mother of making her child sick, I mean, that's a really, really serious accusation.
And I think there was only two doctors that ever like really suspected something further enough to say something. What really gets me there is with the talking thing, none of her conditions early on would have made it difficult for her to speak how she was feeling, tell the doctors these things. And I don't know about you, but for me, my mom has always been tell the doctor how you're feeling. Like you got to voice it, because at some point they're not going to be there to talk for you in those roles. So you have to advocate for yourself. And so it's very interesting that like that wasn't a red flag for them.
Exactly, yeah. And I think it could also have to do with, I think more people didn't question it because Dee Dee had actually told people that she had a mental age of much younger than what she really was. So when she was 16, 17, really Dee Dee was saying to people that she has the mind of a 7-year-old.
Right.
Like she won't understand what you're talking about, but I know I can describe it for her.
Right.
And that was just another way that she was really able to control Gypsy. I mean, she controlled every aspect of her life. Gypsy was never on her own. She was never in the room without Dee Dee there with her. And they even slept in the same bed. I mean, they were really inseparable, and that's why this is such a dangerous, concerning case. And experts actually believe that Dee Dee had a mental illness known as Munchausen syndrome by proxy. Sarah, do you want to talk a little bit about?
Yes. So Munchausen syndrome by proxy is a serious mental disorder. It's described in a way that which caregivers make up fake symptoms or cause real symptoms in a child, elderly person, or disabled person. Really, anyone can be a victim of this. And this condition is typically seen in a parent and child relationship. It's considered a very serious form of child abuse. Situations involving Munchausen syndrome typically are fatal roughly like 6 to 10% of the time. You know, people said they weren't really sure how this came about for Dee Dee. We don't know much about her personal life or backstory, but we can only assume there was some type of trauma that made her want to have this control, that and made her have this syndrome as well.
Yeah.
So with her syndrome, they're typically, oh gosh, we're gonna edit this out. With Munchausen by proxy, the person who suffers from that syndrome is typically seeking attention and admiration and sympathy, that comes with being the caretaker of an ill person, right? You talk about at the end of like Gypsy and her problems that started arising, she was so upset because she's like, I gave you everything. And we'll get into that later on, but she wants that sympathy. She seemed to really just be like have the role of being a nurturer and taking care of Gypsy. She seemed like she had no problems. I mean, later on at some point, she even didn't hold a job because she was like taking care of Gypsy full time. And that's what she told everyone.
Yeah, and she also really seemed to have no problem taking advantage of other people and their generosity. She had no problem accepting things. And along with that comes her financial motivations, which I also think definitely play a pretty big part in this case.
For sure. I mean, she had money being sent to her from Gypsy's father from the beginning, but then you talk about there's trips and Make-A-Wish and even houses that were sponsored.
Full free stays at Ronald McDonald House. Yeah, those Make-A-Wish trips, free flights.
Yeah.
And even their housing, it was built by Habitat for Humanity. That was all rent-free. She paid nothing. And she also claimed that due to Gypsy's condition, she couldn't work. So the government actually did grant her financial assistance.
Right.
So she really had it made. This whole situation really benefited her in more ways than I think we typically would think about.
And I think one of the trips they ended up going to Disney World. There's a photo of them like in front of the castle, and Dee Dee has Gypsy in the wheelchair, and you see her having the glasses on. And I mean, looking back at that, you're like, my God, she didn't need the wheelchair and she didn't need the glasses. Like this poor girl.
Yeah. She really was, in all senses of the word, she was trapped.
Yeah.
She could not escape. I mean, she's a minor and her mother is telling people that she is mentally incompetent.
Right.
I mean, there is nothing she can do to escape the situation.
Yeah. Very manipulative.
Let's talk a little bit about Dee Dee and Gypsy's move to Springfield, Missouri.
Yes. So they had moved, I believe, a couple times before this, but then Dee Dee, I believe, finally kind of cut everyone off in her life, not only friends, but then family as well. So she didn't really have anywhere to turn. And so that's when I believe, who was it that sponsored the house being built?
A Habitat for Humanity.
Yes, Habitat for Humanity, I believe, sponsored that move. They built the house, they built the wheelchair ramp in Springfield. So Dee Dee told Gypsy's father, Rod, that their daughter had a chromosomal disorder that led to her many health issues. And he actually complimented Dee Dee for her devoted care.
Yeah, he really was supportive pretty much to the end. I mean, he pretty much said, Dee Dee, whatever you need.
Right.
I'll support you.
So kind of talking about those family issues, some of Dee Dee's family then started to note that Gypsy Rose didn't seem to need a wheelchair and didn't seem, as sick as Dee Dee was making it seem. So that's why Dee Dee and Gypsy moved away.
Yeah, and every time somebody, whether it be family or doctors even, every time somebody really started to question and catch on to what was really happening, that's when Dee Dee decided to pick up and move further.
Right.
So they started in Louisiana, and originally they moved about an hour away to Slidell, Louisiana.
Yeah.
Which isn't that far, but still, she doesn't know everybody.
Right.
She's not being questioned. But they made it as far as Missouri.
Yeah.
They really wanted to cut off all contact. They didn't want people to be able to find them. And it's really important to note that when they arrived in Missouri, obviously she took Gypsy to see a new doctor. And she told this doctor that she didn't have any of Gypsy's medical records. She said,
oh, yes, I believe Hurricane Katrina happened, right? While they were living.
Yes, yeah. All of these records were lost in Katrina. She had nothing but just trust her. Trust her on this. Yeah. She knows her child.
And I think that's what actually allowed her to forge the birth certificate document as well, because she had been telling people Gypsy was 14 when she was actually 18. So there was like that 4-year difference. But then that was able to be changed because of her lost documents.
Yeah, well, and she continued this up until she died, the whole age scheme. I think Gypsy was 23 at the time her mother was killed. And really her mother was telling people at that time that she was around 16. And she had all kinds of forged documents, different things that she kept with her to continue this con, really is what it was.
And I think even when her dad called her on her 18th birthday, mother mentioned, like, don't tell her about her 18th birthday.
Because even Gypsy herself didn't know how old she was. Her mother they never talked about it, and she wasn't allowed to ask questions.
Yeah. I mean, too, when you spend your days almost in like that medicated haze, I mean, time would start to blur for anyone. So I can only imagine.
Yeah, and she really was so heavily medicated, and sometimes her mother would literally sedate her.
Yeah.
For days at a time. I mean, she wouldn't know what's going on, how much time had passed.
Right. And I think that's why she actually tried to get that feeding tube so she could control what she could and couldn't do based off of like medications. She could make her take a medicine because she was giving it to her with food or things like that. So it was not in Gypsy's control to just say.
Yeah.
I think this is when she moved, she finally realized that she wanted to be like a normal teenager and make friends on the block and hang out with people. And like we've talked about, Dee Dee told everyone that she was mentally less old. So people treated her differently. So people didn't want to, in a way, hang out with her or treated her differently because
Yeah, they treated her as though she was legitimately a special needs child.
yes,
When in reality, I mean, she could understand and communicate just the same as anybody else her real age.
so that's when I think Gypsy started going on their home computer and trying to make online friends.
And it's really important to note that, I mean, while Gypsy didn't really understand what her mother was doing to her, she did obviously have some kind of idea. I mean, she knew she could walk.
Right.
She knew she could walk, and her mother wouldn't allow her to, especially in public places, get out of her wheelchair.
Yeah.
Imagine how frustrating that would be to know that you are physically able and somebody keep you confined in a space like that. But yeah, as you mentioned, she decided to go online. She had tried this a couple times before. Her mother didn't approve of her being online.
Right.
That was a really big part of controlling her, was making sure she didn't have any kind of communication that Dee Dee couldn't monitor.
Right. And I think that first time she initially got caught is when Dee Dee began being physically abusive. I believe it said she took a hanger and like dragged her back to the room and told her she was not allowed to use the computer without parental supervision again. But it didn't stop Gypsy from wanting contact with the outside world.
Yeah, and I mean, Gypsy's between 18 and 20 when these
Right.
events are happening. And that's fairly normal socially to have some kind of internet interaction or friends
For sure.
outside of your parents' control. These are very normal things to want, especially as you're hitting puberty. I mean, you need that sense of independence.
Right. And I think it's worth noting too, if you ever see photos of like Gypsy and Dee Dee, it wasn't like Gypsy could just overpower Dee Dee in a sense. Not only was she being drugged and being told all these lies, but Dee Dee was also physically bigger than her. So it would have been hard to overpower her.
Yeah, not only that, but other than the beatings, she also denied Gypsy food on several occasions. So, I mean, Gypsy was, she was small. She was rather skinny, and I don't think she would have been able to fend well, even just running away, which she tried. She tried multiple times, and her mother, she tracked her down.
Yes, I believe at a convention she tried the first time. I'm not sure where Dee Dee went, maybe the restroom, something like that. But she did try and get away, and she told a man she needed to leave. The man brought her back to his hotel room, and rather than telling the man what was going on, she just was talking about the convention that they were at and the booths and all of that. And I think it was said that 4 hours later, Dee Dee eventually came and was pounding on the hotel room door, and eventually got her out of there.
Yeah.
So very manipulative. But she continued going to those conventions and having a big interest in movies. As soon as that initially got taken away from her, it piqued her interest, I believe, in what category? Fantasy, I believe, right? Movies?
Sci-fi.
Yeah.
Type.
And she hopped on late at night. She tried again to get on online, and she got on a dating website.
Yeah, a Christian dating website, which is interesting. And there she met Nicholas Godejohn, and he is a really, really integral part of the story.
For sure.
They began an online relationship, so they were talking pretty regularly, but he lived about 600 miles from Springfield, in a small Wisconsin town. And in March 2015, so 3 years after they had began their online conversation.
Right, because they were long distance boyfriend and girlfriend for a while, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So in March of 2015, they decided to arrange a meeting because they had never met in person before. So they were supposed to meet each other for the first time at a movie theater in Springfield. And Dee Dee and Gypsy were going to see Cinderella at this movie theater.
Love that movie.
And they were meant to coincidentally run into Nicholas Godejohn. The hope was that after Dee Dee met him, it would kind of give them an excuse to begin a relationship face to face. Dee Dee was supposed to like him in theory, but that didn't happen. The introduction failed, and Dee Dee was really upset by Gypsy's fascination with this man that they met at the movies.
Because I think Dee Dee thought it was creepy because Gypsy had dressed up as Cinderella and he had dressed up as Prince Charming, and so she comes to this movie theater and sees this man alone,
without a child, without a girlfriend,
seeing Cinderella.
It was strange,
right?
To be fair, but so after this happened, Gypsy began talking to Godejohn about saving her by killing her abusive mother.
And I think it's a little background into that is during their relationship online, he had often talked about different forms of himself. He had told Gypsy that he had multiple personality disorder. So he told her this evil version of himself. And she noted from very early on that she never wanted to see that side of him. But as soon as she felt like she needed a way out and she couldn't do it herself, she needed help with that. And she asked him to help.
Yeah. So after that, they formulated this plan, and Gypsy paid for Godejohn to take a bus back down to Missouri from Wisconsin so that he could commit the murder.
Yeah. And I think online they were even talking about, they would not talk about him as committing the murder. They would say, what does he need, as in like his alter ego?
Yes. Yeah. The multiple personalities really plays an interesting part in this. And that was actually part of his defense later in court was that it was his multiple personalities.
Which I don't think he ever had diagnosed. I believe there were a couple doctors who had said he at least had some mental disability, but never said that it was multiple personality disorder.
Yeah, it was known that he had a low IQ and severe autism. He was never diagnosed with anything nearing multiple personality.
Right.
So after this, after Nicholas agreed to participate, and they planned everything out, he traveled to Missouri.
Yes.
So on June 9th, 2015, he entered the house while Dee Dee was asleep, and he told Gypsy, go in the bathroom, cover your ears, and you can't come out until I come and get you.
And I believe Gypsy actually opened the door for him, right?
Yes.
And it's said that before that happened, Dee Dee was kind of suspicious that something was going on behind the scenes because she suddenly just got nicer. And she told Gypsy that night, please don't hurt me.
Yeah. So Gypsy let him inside, and she went to the bathroom, covered her ears. She didn't play an active part in the murder itself.
But that word you started off the intro with, I think, is really important. She orchestrated.
She did. Yeah.
Yes.
Really, at the end of the day, I don't think this would have happened if Gypsy hadn't asked
for sure
Nicholas to do this.
And he said that himself in trial as well. He was like, it would have never occurred.
Yeah, absolutely. So Nicholas snuck into the bedroom where Dee Dee was sleeping and stabbed her 17 times, and she was calling out Gypsy's name this whole time. Gypsy did cover her ears, but she heard her mother in her last moments.
And I believe she stated on several places that she felt the need to like go in there and stop him and save her.
Yeah.
But she was froze in that moment in time. Yeah.
So after the murder was committed, Gypsy and Nicholas actually made posts to Gypsy and Dee Dee's joint Facebook account.
Right.
And it was some pretty concerning posts that were on there. One said that B is dead, and some others had much more graphic terms used. And seeing these, Dee Dee's friends in Springfield were concerned.
Yeah, rightfully so.
Yeah, they sent police to the house to do a welfare check because, I mean, obviously seeing those things posted, you're worried about the well-being of the people you know.
And that's when I believe they got there and they saw that Gypsy's wheelchairs were all still inside through the windows, and but the police actually wouldn't go in until they had a search warrant in hand. So I think they had to wait 7 more hours, I believe it was, to be able to go in. And then they found all the medications, and they were able to find Dee Dee's body as well.
Gypsy's wheelchair and everything that she needs still being inside the home. I mean, police first thought, I mean, she's been taken. So somebody kidnapped Gypsy after killing her mother.
And without all of those things, how is she going to survive?
Exactly, because everybody at this point still believed that, I mean, Gypsy needed this wheelchair, she needed this medication, her feeding tube, I mean, all of these things. But Gypsy and Nicholas traveled back to his home in Wisconsin. And that's where police found them several days later. Because of those Facebook posts, they were able to track that IP address back to Nicholas. And I mean, when police arrived, they were really shocked to see, I mean, she's not in a wheelchair.
Right. And she was walking around.
And her hair is growing back.
Yeah.
I mean, she looks like a regular person her age, a regular 23-year-old. So Gypsy initially denied any involvement in the murder. She originally claimed she knew nothing of what happened. She did not instruct him to do it, but police were able to break that down a little bit more and kind of get the real story.
Especially after that many years of trauma, I bet it didn't take long to want to tell someone about that.
Yeah, well, and she really thought that there was nobody who could help her.
Right.
she was still in that mindset.
Mhm.
I mean, she was still trapped. She wanted out of that situation, and that was the only way that she could get truly out of that situation.
Yeah.
But in contrast, Nicholas was very open from the get-go about what happened. I mean, police said, "We know you did it," and the whole story came out.
Right.
I believe you can find the interrogation tapes on YouTube. It's really an interesting watch.
I think you can find the crime scene photos as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So obviously, Gypsy had suffered years of abuse by her mother. And in Missouri, a first-degree murder charge can actually carry the death penalty or a life sentence without parole. But prosecutor Dan Patterson opted not to seek the death penalty or even a life sentence without parole when he was prosecuting this case.
And I think that was based off of, for Nick, the fact that, like he said, it wouldn't have happened without Gypsy's hand in it.
Yeah. Yeah. But he called the situation extraordinary and unusual.
For sure.
Which, I mean, I would agree
Yeah.
that it is. Yeah.
Definitely explains it.
But Gypsy's attorney was able to bring her charge down to second-degree murder after they were able to get real medical records that showed proof of the abuse.
Right.
And Gypsy was reportedly so malnourished that she actually gained 14 pounds when she was in prison.
Wow. I feel like that's usually the opposite. People lose weight.
Yeah. Typically, like in a stressful situation,
Yeah.
like jail, I mean, you're going to lose weight, not gain
For
it. So
sure.
that really shows what kind of condition she was in.
Right. She was in a better environment just being in jail.
Absolutely. A lot of people actually believe that because of the abuse, Gypsy shouldn't have faced prison time at all.
I think that brings up a good point. If she would have been better suited for like a psychiatric facility or something like that.
Yeah.
To help rehabilitate her in a sense.
Absolutely. Yeah. The trauma that she experienced, I don't want to say it was a normal reaction what she did, but I mean, she really truly was in a situation that was inescapable.
Right.
And that kind of abuse, I mean, what that does to you cognitively.
Yeah.
I mean, it really messed her up.
And not that it's right, but there are many people who have felt like that it's their only out. You take the Menendez brothers, for example. It's something people can turn to if they feel like they have no other option.
Yeah. Yeah. I think she truly believed that the rest of her life wouldn't change.
She'd be under her mother's thumb.
Yeah, for the rest of her life. But in July of 2016, Gypsy ended up accepting a plea agreement. And she pled guilty to second-degree murder, and she got a sentence of 10 years.
Yes.
Which, all things considered, I think is mostly to her benefit. Yeah. Godejohn's defense argued that he also shouldn't be convicted of first-degree murder. They argued that because he was on the autism spectrum, had a low IQ, and wasn't really able to reflect on his actions, whether or not they were right or wrong. That was really their whole case. However, the jury decided that they didn't agree with that. So they decided that he should be charged with first-degree murder, and he was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole.
And he had an additional charge too, I believe, right?
Yeah, 25 years for armed criminal action. So that tacked on. I mean, he really did it. But Gypsy, once she was in an actual correctional facility, she stated that she felt more free in prison than she ever felt with her mother. She said, "This time in prison is good for me. I've been raised to do what my mother taught me to do, and those things aren't very good. She taught me to lie, and I don't want to lie. I want to be a good, honest person." Do you think she was rehabilitated at all?
I think to a degree. There's been studies done that the maximum, like you get the most out of prison at around 10 years, and you don't get anything more out of it after that period of time. So I think, again, whether she should have been in prison or not is up to personal
opinion.
Yeah, personal opinion. But I think she got something out of it because she's done a lot with her life since getting out.
Yeah. So after she served about 8 years at Chillicothe Correctional Center in Missouri, Gypsy Rose was released early in December of 2023. She relocated to Louisiana, where her father and stepmother live.
Yes.
And is reportedly living it up.
Yeah. She's had a couple different relationships now. I believe there was rumors of a baby on the way for a little while. I'm not sure how true that is or not.
She had a baby.
Yeah. And yeah, she has a great relationship with her father and stepmom now. And I think she's doing a lot better. That's for sure.
Yeah. We'll wrap it up here soon, but I did just want to add, when asked about it more recently, since she's been out of prison, Gypsy actually says that she does regret killing her mother. She does regret playing a part in that, and she she wishes her mother were still alive, especially with the birth of her baby.
Yeah.
When that happened, she did say that she wishes her mother would have been there for that, to see that and experience that with her.
And I think people even asked her too, like, what will you say to your kid if they ask about it? And she said that her stepmom is really going to play the role of grandma, but that she'd be honest with her kid. So it goes back to what she said about being a good and honest person.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us again. We'll be back next week with another episode, but
Yes.
until then, this has been The Trend.
Thanks, everyone, for tuning into this episode of The Trend. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, please feel free to reach out to us at The Trend's website at www.trendmediallc.com, or you can email us at any time at thetrend@trendmediallc.com. We welcome everybody's comments, suggestions, or reviews. Don't forget to stay connected with us on social media. Follow us on TikTok and Instagram at Trend Media Podcast, and join the conversation on Facebook by searching The Trend Podcast. Check out our Amazon page through the link on our website, where you'll find some of our recommended products. We'll be back next time with more true crime stories, insights on law enforcement trends, and current trends with our region and the people we serve. Until then, stay curious, stay informed, and stay part of The Trend.